Well, I'll go ahead and get started with my intro, and then soon enough we'll be mesmerized by all that Dee has to tell us in just a sec. But first and foremost, thank you so much, Dee, for joining us to lead Psychologically Safe Disruptive Thinking. If this is your first time meeting Dee, she is a speaker that helps women find their voices, align their values and purpose. She uses research, best practices, and real-world experience attained through her nearly 30-year career in coaching, facilitating, and speaking to provide customized, thought-provoking keynotes, presentations, and workshops across diverse topics and groups. She was just telling me her schedule for the next few weeks. So yeah, that is definitely very packed, very true as well. Well, I'm very excited for this presentation. It feels like it's been months coming. So very excited for the day to finally be here. But before we get started, if this is your first time with Breaking the Glass, I'm Elizabeth Lamb. I'm the Partnerships Manager. What we do is we partner with tech companies and nonprofits to provide free, personalized programming on diversity, inclusion, and career development topics. We have provided webinars for our partners like Walmart, IBM, Dell, and Charter Communications. Let me know if you want to learn more or if you want to collaborate on a program. We're always looking for speakers, people to partner with. So email me after the session. This session is going to be interactive as well. We do encourage you to chat, insert in the Q&A, and if you're really feeling bold and excited, raise your hand and I'll take you off mute and you can start a dialogue with us as well. We know that that'll be a lot of fun. So yeah, but without taking up any more of your time, I'm going to go on mute for a bit of the session and typing away some resources in the chat. But without further ado, Dee, I'm going to pass it to you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And hello to all the people I know and hello to all the people I don't know. It's lovely to have you here. Of course, I can't see you. So like Elizabeth said, if you want to put your hand up and give me a voice to share some time with, that's definitely something I love. So today, this space is safe, it's warm, it's welcoming, but it's also experimental. And this is a place where we explore ideas, we ask questions, not just you, but me as well. And so what I really want for you to do is to engage. Now, sometimes engaging means you're sharing your stories or observations or questions or ideas in the chat or putting your hand up. And sometimes it's just something that you're kind of doing on your own. And if you do that, and later on you want to actually have a conversation about it, you can reach out to me and we can have a conversation about it. So don't feel like I gotta have all my questions and I gotta get my answers now, because you know what? That's not how human brains work oftentimes. So the floor is open in a sort of indefinite fashion. So we're going to talk about psychologically safe disruptive thinking. Now, when Elizabeth and I were talking about this, we were exploring what might be interesting and what might happen when we take two ideas that are being talked about a lot out in the larger community, business leadership community, and we brought them together in a way that hasn't necessarily happened in the past before. And that was the origin of this. And I think it has been months, Elizabeth. I think it's been since like May since we talked about this. So it has been something that I've been playing with, and it's been percolating around, and I've had conversations on. So that's kind of the background leading into this. So the first thing I want to invite you to share or to think about is what situations at work feel unsafe. Now, unsafe can mean a lot of different things. So share with me in the chat, put your hand up, give me some ideas. I can be a one-woman show, but it's more fun when I have people to play with. So what situations at work feel unsafe?
Michelle, I see you have your hand up. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk. Hopefully you're going to chime in.
Hi, just Miss D, who I love, you are echoing. You sound like you're in an echo chamber. I don't know why.
Am I echoing for you, Elizabeth?
A little bit, but I didn't think, yeah.
Well, let's see if we can fix that, because that's not something.
Yeah, because normally you don't.
No, normally I don't.
No.
Be better?
Yes.
Well, all right then.
So you stopped echoing. Thank you.
It pays to have friends in the audience. That's tell you the brutal truth when you need to hear it. Thank you. Thank you. So, like I said, experimental space. So we're living it right now. Michelle, was that just, did you have anything to throw in?
I don't work in an office situation. I'm a consultant. So the only person I would have issues with is myself. So I'll have to take that up with myself.
Talk about that later.
We'll talk about that later. Yes, but let's keep going, because people will have some great examples.
I'm sure they will. So, there we go. Am I echoing? Criticizes my work or my thoughts. Judgment on physical appearance versus skill. Absolutely. That's a road I've been down a lot, especially being a speaker. When you're put on the spot and don't feel comfortable giving an honest opinion due to the attendees. Absolutely. Any other thoughts about what might feel unsafe for yourself, or that you've observed or heard from other people? So I made a list, because I always make a list, and feeling sort of exposed and put on the spot. This is my top one, the first one I came up with. Anything where sharing your identity is going to fall into a space where you feel like you're going to be judged. So your gender identity, your sexual preferences, your faith background, any of those things. Language, absolutely, where you don't feel respected, right? So being an N of one, that's always a challenge, because when you're an N of one, you are the only one of that kind, whatever that kind is in that situation, right? So one of the interesting things that happens that I've observed recently is we, of course, have an idea, and this is mostly a true idea, that in structures of dominance, white, straight males have an advantage. And they do, because of a lot of things that we're not necessarily going to get into in this particular talk. But I want to offer you a flip side situation that I'm aware of right now, where there is again, our white, male, straight individual, but he is in a group where he is an N of one. And the rest of the group speaks a different language. He speaks English. Everybody else speaks a different language. It is gender diverse and things like that, but he's an N of one. And he's having an interesting time right now finding out what it feels like to have a voice but not have a voice, to be passed over, to be ignored, to be pushed out of the way. And one of the things that's actually happening is the group, his team that he's part of, is switching languages on him to a language he doesn't understand. And he's very accustomed to being in the other group. So this has been a very interesting sort of space for him to be in. Boundaries, when you feel like there's no boundaries, right? Where people infringe on your boundaries, or you can't put your own boundaries in place, where there's disagreement, where there's an in crowd, whether that's the old guard or people that have worked on things before together and you don't have that history with them. Not getting to explain an idea or ask questions. Yeah. So uncertainty. So you're not sure whether there's going to be funding for this or that. You're not sure if your project is going to be approved or not. Inconsistent leadership. One day your leader thinks everything you guys do is great, and then the next day nothing is right. But the third day it might be great again. So that sort of makes you feel unsafe. Lack of clarity. And I'm going to share a little statistic here with you just in a moment that it'll speak for itself. So inability to test and learn. So that's a little bit about what I think Tammy is at least a little bit talking about, is that idea that nobody has all the answers and nobody has all of the answers perfectly packaged out of their mouths on the first try. And many of us feel like that's exactly what has to happen in order for us to be valuable, worthwhile, contribute, all of those sorts of things. And the last thing on my list was there's no balance. So sometimes there's industries or companies or groups that go through that wild feast or famine sort of thing where it's go, 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 and you have to work until late and on the weekend and have your phone on all the time. And then there's crickets. And then there's a big push again. And living in that space can feel very psychologically unsafe as well. So I want to share a little a little story that I just came across. So McKinsey, which is a global consulting firm, just recently did a survey. They surveyed 100 different companies, and they asked about whether these companies, what they're going to do in a post-COVID work environment. 9 out of 10, so 90 out of 100 of these companies said they absolutely were going to go to hybrid. So that's what they said, 90%. But when asked a follow-up question, 68% said, yes, we're doing a hybrid program, but we have no detailed plan communicated or in place. So in this world, having lack of clarity, I'm going back to work, but I don't know how I'm going back to work. And I don't know how I'm going to meet with people. I don't know when I'm going to meet with people. I don't know how I'm going to balance things or put boundaries in. This is very real for many of us right now. And in this case is a leadership challenge. So we're going to come back to the idea of where leadership falls in this whole idea of creating and sustaining psychological safety. So let's move on and go to what do we mean when we say something is or isn't psychologically safe? What are we talking about? So anybody, what do you mean when you think about that term or you use that term? The floor is open. Anybody? I'm waiting for the chat. Hit me in the chat at least. Don't leave me hanging, people. Okay, so power dynamics. Okay, you can be you. Absolutely. So that authenticity. Anything else? That's it. It's just having a balance of power dynamics, and you can be yourself. Safety. Yep. When the noise outside is greater than your own voice. Not in control of your emotional intelligence. Interesting, Sophia. Safe to speak when you have different ideas from the group. Yeah. I figured it was yours, Sophia. I do that too. I type too fast, and then afterwards I'm like, oh no. Able to speak up without fear of reprisal. Okay, so we're kind of using the word the same way. So not feeling like for any of your contributions, and those contributions can be your beliefs, your ideas, your concerns, your reactions, even just your process of getting to an understanding. You won't be belittled, punished, diminished, made to feel unwelcome. You won't be misunderstood, or people will seek to understand you rather than assuming they understand you. And you won't be ridiculed, because oftentimes people will be heard, but then they'll be made fun of in that space, little and big ways. So Sue says, safe to share ideas in an early or raw state, knowing others will positively build on them and not attack them. Absolutely, Sue. Absolutely. So that's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about psychological safety. But here's the catch. And here's what's happening out in the larger world in a lot of places. People have taken the idea of psychological safety, which comes from Amy Edmondson's work in the early 2000s. Okay, so if you want to look that up, she's a researcher and a writer at Harvard. She's the one who it's not a new idea to humans, but it started being talked about in these terms when she brought it forward. So we have this idea of psychological safety. It's kind of almost the flavor of the day in some places. But what's ending up happening is that people are saying, or leadership is saying, we'll hire a bunch of different people. We'll go and we'll have all of these different people at the table. That will create psychological safety. And then we can check that off our list and move on with our corporate vision. That's tokenism. That's not actually creating psychological safety. Just by having people in the room, just by saying that you have a program in place just by saying that other people you can share and you won't be judged. That doesn't necessarily make it so. Anybody had that experience where somebody said, it's totally safe, we're warm and accepting, and we've got all of our token people here, but you know deep down, this is still not a safe place to be. And so despite the optics of it, all bets are off. Anybody have that experience? I'm willing to bet there's a few people out there. Hit me up in the chat with a yes, hell yes, yup, hell no, whatever is your flavor. So Lindsay says yes. Diversity doesn't always mean inclusion and belonging. Thanks, Elizabeth. You're absolutely right. So Astrid says yes. Okay, and Astrid's coming to us from all the way across in Europe. She's a ways away from me right now because I happen to be in the Rocky Mountains of Canada. So a little bit of distance between Astrid and I, but that's okay. We're cool with that. So those are some of the things to think about when we think about psychological safety. It's been around a while. It's always been around, really, but it's been around a while. But that it's not just about a program. It's not just about putting a name on it. It's a far more complex situation than that. So hopefully that makes some sense. And part of why it's so complex is because we are like little Russian nesting dolls. And what do I mean by that? This one's straight from, it says made in the USSR on there. This is an old one. So this is the face we bring to our meetings, to our individual relationships, to the board, whatever. When we think about it, we all know that this isn't the whole story, right? We know that, trust, yes, we're going to get to that soon. There's more inside of us. And of course, there's more inside of us. And then at the end of the day, really, we're a person that started off as a little person who's had experiences and built stories about what feels safe, what is safe, how to include people or not include people, when it's safe to talk or not to talk, what kinds of risks we're willing to take, what kinds of costs we're willing to pay, right? And each one of us is like that. So that's something really important I want you to think about, is that when you're in a room, when we're in this room right now, virtual though it may be, you see one version of me, I see one version of Elizabeth, I see Michelle's lovely picture and so on. But that's just one layer. It's like Shrek and Donkey, and like we're like onions, if you know the reference I'm making there. So I love me some Shrek. Okay, so let's see here. I got like lots of screens going on here. So we've got some understanding around what psychological safety is and isn't, and how it can manifest and how it can't. So I'm just going to stop here. Are there any questions or comments that you want to make before we jump in to the other side, which is, of course, the disruptive thinking piece of it? So this is your big chance. Anybody? No? Well, that means either I've done a really good job of explaining it, or I've bored you to death and you've tuned me out. So whichever one it is, and I'm hoping it's the first one, we're going to move on. Okay, so now we're going to talk about disruptive thinking. So this word, again, the idea of being a disruptive thinker, comes to us from some research, again, Harvard, Clayton Christensen in 1995. So he created this theory. Okay, and this is really, really important because remember we were talking about flavor of the day and people picking up terms and using them. This one, if you get nothing else out of today, I want you to get this, okay? So disruptive thinking, it's everywhere in Fortune and Forbes and Catalyst and McKinsey and everywhere these things are talked about. Here's the thing. The way it's being used, the term 95% of the time isn't actually what it is. I know, how convenient is that? So the popular culture around this stuff has taken disruptive thinking, really liked the idea of being kind of outside the box and whatnot, and it's taken that word to use, but it's not what it means. disruptive thinking or disruptive innovation is a particular business model that has to do with, customers you serve or products that you offer. We're not going to get into that part of it, but trust me when I say that the person who created this theory, Christensen, he's not very happy about what has happened with his theory. And since 2015, he has been very open about that. So I'm going to propose a different term here in a moment, but let's just talk for a moment about what is the problem with actually using the word disruptive. Well, what are some synonyms for disruptive? What does the word disruptive actually mean? Anybody? So disruptive, upsetting, yep, got that. What else? How good are you guys at the thesaurus game? Rock the boat, make a change. Now, here's what's interesting about what you guys are saying, and this is exactly my point. Disruption means, synonym-wise, disturbing, rowdy, troublesome, unruly, unsettling. It's like, if you can see this, this is like the classic 1989 Batman Joker. This is the guy that comes in and all hell breaks loose, okay? That's disruptiveness. And that is why disruptiveness as a term is not accurate. And it's also why it's so terrifying to so many teams and leaders, because they associate disruption with chaos, lack of control. So I'm going to propose that we use the term divergent thinking because it's more accurate. It's more like not thinking along the normal lines, asking what if, why not? It's more like Iron Man. It's taking all of these ideas and questioning what might happen if, or why can't we do that? That's divergent thinking, okay? Disruptive, Joker, chaos. Iron Man, new ideas, new technologies, new approaches. So think about that when you come across it again. So we're going to look at a little bit of a diagram here because there was something I wanted to explain to you, and I realized I didn't have enough body parts to actually show you it with my body. So I crumbled and I used a slide. So I'm going to share that with you guys right now, and we're going to have a little look at it. Okay, so that was the one before. Okay, so what we start off with, let's imagine that whether this is a team, a brand new company, a nonprofit, doesn't matter. You're going to start off with some leadership, the person who has the idea. It's an N originally, of one. And then, of course, it can move from that. So that N of one creates a company or a team or whatever. So you can think of it in terms of a portfolio or equity or assets or a company creating value. Okay, so wanting to create value. And then there's a bank account balance. And so you're putting an investment, you've got this money and the cash flow is moving through this. Okay, so we're setting this up. And originally you're going to have customers, right? So the leadership creates this company, this idea, this product, whatever. We seed it with some money, and now we have some customers still. We're still small. The customers contribute to the bank account balance, which then contributes to the equity in the company. Great. But at some point in time, hopefully you end up with some employees, right? Other people sharing the work. Now you can think of a family like this too, to be honest with you, or a community organization. So now the leadership is directing the employees, and the employees are the ones dealing with the customers. The customers are bringing in the cash flow. But all of this hinges on leadership, okay, and a really top-down type of approach. And there's reasons why we do have to have that sort of alpha leadership in place for certain things, but do we have to have it all the time? So then, what if we were to add the idea of psychological safety to the mix, right? What if we were to say, we're going to, and not just tokenism and not just because it sounds good, we're going to work to create environments that are psychologically safe. What will we get out of that? What is the business case for this? Because it's wonderful to say that these are great ideas and we should do them, but at the end of the day, there's because of the way we live and the way companies are built, people want to make a living at a minimum out of what they're doing. So with psychological safety, the current theory is that you're going to get disruptive thinking. But remember, disruptive is not an accurate term, and there's a lot of baggage that comes with that word. So we're going to substitute that, and we're going to put in divergent thinking. Okay, so psychological safety opens the door for the possibility of divergent thinking. Doesn't mean it automatically happens, but it can open the door for the possibility of it. So now the door's open. We're going to get some things happening, hopefully. And now we start to get conceptual and tangible deposits and investments from our employees that are coming through this system. Okay. And then where do they go? Well, they go right up into the value equation, right? So they're going up through there. So not just the customers, not just the leadership. Now the employees are adding a different kind of value. Because of course, your employees in doing what they do and transacting with customers, yes, there is value being added, but this is a different kind of value potentially. And it can be the distinction between a long-lived and successful enterprise, family, group, team versus not. So these diverse perspectives that we start to get in this model, they come down to two things, two elements. And that is, and we were talking about it a little bit before, presence and voices. Now I want to be clear about something. Presence isn't the way presence is being used as some people say gravitas, some people say it's part of charisma, how you hold yourself, poise. That's not what I mean. I mean, you're there. Your presence is there. Now, presence, it could be that it's gender diversity that you don't have in the room. It could be that the people in the room don't represent your actual customer base or your potential customer base. It might be that it doesn't represent the stakeholders in this particular situation. But again, like we talked about, being there isn't enough. You need to have a mechanism for voices to be heard, for people to be seen and voices to be heard. So those are the preconditions for this to happen. So it's like setting up DEI training, and the research shows clearly putting your managers through a 1-hour DEI training or sexual inappropriateness test, or not testing, training and things like that, actually backfires, because the people that were there before most times come to resent the idea rather than embrace the idea. And we want to embrace the idea. So, we're going to have an avalanche here. What's all of this about? And it's about change, right? When you continue to do the things the way you've always done them, they go along in a certain fashion. Change is what happens when you do things differently. Sometimes it's external, like COVID and things like that, where guess what? You get to change whether you want to or not. So there's my dad always said to me, you can do it the easy way or you can do it the hard way, but it's going to happen either way you slice it. And that's kind of how I look at change and the potential of change. So change comes with two sets of feelings, right? It comes with freedom and excitement and curiosity, but it comes also with fear and panic and stress and grief and loss and anger. So depending on where you sit in this sort of complex, your feelings might be inflected by these different things. So I have a question for you now, because I have talked long enough on this. Who do you suppose is going to perhaps be the most resistant to creating psychological safety, allowing for divergent thinking, and the possibility of real change? Where's the resistance going to come from in your experience? So hit me up, put your hand up, hit me up in the chat. Anything. Where's the resistance coming from or going to come from? What would you predict? The most fearful people? Absolutely. Why are they fearful, Craig? So privileged, okay? So privilege can come in lots of different forms. Being part of a dominant group, numerically or just socially, can be having that threatened is a huge thing. Who else might? So who will lose control or power? Who's in the most entitled position currently? Right? People that are part of the in crowd. Right, absolutely. So what we have is a situation where it could be the old guard, right? This is the way we've always done it. And I've been here longer than you've been here, so don't tell me my job, right? You can get that. You can get ageism there, and that works actually both ways, guys. Because I have a friend who worked for Nike, designer for 30 years. They switched out their model. They brought in a very young group cohort within her women's sport design team that she was the leader of. But the younger group were the ones that said that she couldn't contribute because she was too old, even though she was the leader of the team. So it doesn't always have to be the oldest. It doesn't always have to be the leader. It doesn't always have to be gender or language or anything specific. So I want to caution everybody against just making blanket statements, right? So we're going to come back to so then what do you do? What do you look for, right, when you do this? So pride, status, right? Feeling triggered, people in dominant groups, all of those types of groups potentially, and I am not saying that always by any stretch of the imagination, but potentially can be the ones that do things that are either overt, so obvious, or covert in a sort of subtle way that they may or may not even be aware of, that diminish or destroy any hope of psychological safety, and then they destroy, by way of that, options for divergent thinking and so on and so forth through our model. So, does that make sense? That kind of putting a few pieces together and you're like, okay, yeah, I'm following. Yes? Maybe? No? This is like Gladiator and like whether somebody gets to live or die in Gladiator. Okay, thank you, Sue. Thank you. So, as was mentioned, and Sue, this is perfect because it was trust and vulnerability, the idea that you brought up. So how do you create this? How do you have an adjustment to this new way of potentially thinking or acting? So we're going to go back and look at just a little bit more here. So research has shown that for people in groups, in leadership groups, and this is not just, it says enterprise perception there. So enterprise doesn't have to be a capitalist corporate enterprise. It can be any group collective thing, okay? So there's two sorts of elements that we look at. So personal experience. What situations or what are the key things that people will feel move them towards psychological safety and then this divergent thinking? Well, number one, authenticity. Encouraging individuals feel encouraged to be themselves and speak up at work. Belonging. So individuals feel connected to others at work. And being connected isn't the same as having an affinity bias. So you're like me and therefore I like you, right? So you can be connected and still be incredibly diverse and meaningful work. So what you do matters. What you contribute matters. So that's on the personal level. On the enterprise level, there's that idea that there's acceptance, that employees value and embrace diversity versus giving lip service to it. There's camaraderie, right? And this goes beyond sort of the team building experiential events to actual real camaraderie. And then there's fairness. So equitable treatment and a fair chance to succeed. And this is what a lot of the conversation is about right now, because so many women, so many people of color, so many diverse people come in the bottom of the system, yet when we get to the top of the system, the numbers are totally skewed. And in fact, some of you have perhaps heard me say this before. So 54% of women want to be leaders when they come out of undergrad, 45% of men, and these are general statistics. 43% of women and 34% of men want to be leadership positions. Then when asked if they want to go all the way to the top, 54% of women say yes, 45% of men say yes. You notice the numbers skewed there. Yet at the end of the day, the global distribution on just in gender terms of leadership is 7% women at the top, 93% men at the top. There's all kinds of systemic reasons, historical reasons, cultural reasons, that this isn't the space for that, but this is an acknowledgement of that, so that the fair chance to succeed means a lot of different things at a lot of different stages along the way of your life journey. All right. So it all comes down, when it was weighted, it's the personal experience. It's the individual's experience within the organization that makes the biggest difference. And where does the research show it has to start? It starts at the top. So that means, going back to our model from before, that leadership, right? That N of 1 starts off at the very, very beginning. Oh, I should hit the right buttons here. There's a distribution of power, right? Employees witness this. They know. Then there's influence, which can be official power or unofficial power. But also, that distribution of power also comes with leadership style and expectations. So, how you lead, what you model, how you say, how you engage as a leader, and this can be like little L leader, sort of just kind of an informal leader, or the big pickle leader, how you show up is going to impact the engagement. When people see leadership acting in a certain way, that creates a space, an opening for them as well to engage in that way. It doesn't feel safe to engage in sort of an open, authentic, vulnerable way when leadership isn't showing that. Yet leadership programs and leadership school don't, very rarely, it's starting to change now with the idea of humility, but they don't talk about this sort of thing. And so what you end up with is a cycle that keeps going on over and over and over again, where you can't create something that the leader doesn't bring in. So if you find yourself in a leadership position, or you're coaching leaders, or you're in some way able to impact how leaders become leaders and practice leadership, this is what it comes down to, is creating that mentality, that modeling, that trust and vulnerability has to start at the top. So if they're engaged, the influence goes up, and we still have our leadership up here, still being at the head of it. Now we're going to add in the psychological safety. We get the divergent thinking because the leader's showing us this. This can contribute to that shared vision, mission, goals, intention, purpose, that second column, that enterprise level, where we see things starting to shift. So then the distribution of power and influence gets shared. That also means that there's, theoretically at least, less pressure on the employer too, or I shouldn't say employer, the leader. This is actually called, and this is referencing back to some new work by Amy Edmondson looking at different types of leaders. And if you follow leadership theory, you will have heard of charismatic leadership and task-based leadership and authentic leadership and any number of things. She's now calling this a learning zone leader. And it comes down to 4 things. They're just human things that we, in theory, learned when we were like the little people inside here. And that's listening, and then speaking or communicating, understanding, and acting. So that's what a leader has to actually start with. There's all kinds of arguments for return on investment. So we've got things like, oh, what are the numbers here? There's a 53% increase in performance when women are on boards, a 35% greater return on investment when you have diverse employees. And the cost, just so you know, so there's not just the benefit, there's the cost. So for instance, LGBTQIA employees, 47% as of last year said they had experienced discrimination at work. And as a result of these sorts of things, they and other people that have felt discrimination have left the workplace, gone on to other opportunities. That is at a cost of what is estimated to be $64 billion. When people don't feel like they belong, that they are safe, that they can contribute, they leave if they can, and it's costing. It's costing businesses, schools, governments, you name it. It costs an enormous amount of money for leaders and for organizations to not create psychological safety. And the estimate right now is that the global GDP by 2028 will increase by $8 trillion, those are US dollars, if that sort of divergent mindset that comes from a psychologically safe space, 10%, all you have to do is go up by 10%, increase the divergent thinking, and $8 trillion is the estimated increase through the economy. Pretty big. That's pretty big. So now what do? We've touched on a bit of it now. So we've got taking inventory about, what do you have on the inside? What do other people have on the inside that can contribute? So it's kind of like this. This is Snack Crate is the coolest thing. You get like these little snack boxes from around the world, but they come and you never know what's inside them, just like people. So you can stay over there and say, I'm just going to have my things over here and you're going to have your things over here. It's kind of like sharing at lunch. But what if we open it up and share it? And I find out that this box person, is from Hawaii. Seriously, this is from Hawaii. And there's all kinds of cool things like Kona little coffee biscuits and chips and all those sorts of things. So you can go, hey, I've never thought of that. Never tried it. Kind of seems maybe a little weird. But hey, it doesn't cost us anything or very little to create that space to try. And the other box, we open it up, other person, and they start to share what they've got on the inside. Well, this one's from Colombia. And now we've got plantain chips. Never had plantain chips. I'm going to try them. Because you know what? I can't make a decision or judge something if I don't know anything about it. If I don't at least allow the door open a little tiny bit. So, ways that you can start to do this in workplace. Well, looking at who's there and who isn't. Who's heard and who isn't. How they're heard or not heard. Include yourself in this, by the way. How the messages are being conveyed, implicit or explicit. Acknowledge when other people bring value to the table. Attribute the right ideas to the right people. Okay? Provide space for exploration. So those are some of the basic ideas, and we've talked about it, a bunch of others, but I'm going to ask you now as our final sort of last question. How could you, would you, or do you create that psychologically safe space that might encourage divergent thinking? How could, would, or have you done this or witnessed it? So tell me. We're coming to the end of our time together, so this is the last thing we're going to do before we do Q&A. So any thoughts beyond what we've talked about? How can we encourage this in a practical, everyday way? Anybody? Anybody? I have ideas. Identify who the influencers are. If you can if you have that contact. Oh, we have Lindsay, thank you. So I'll interrupt myself to include you. We have a women in tech group that meets regularly each month, and we discuss topics like this to help spread a safe space. So awareness, looking inside the box and talking about it, and acknowledging when you maybe don't understand something, or checking that what you think you understand is what you understand. How else? Be open to all ideas. Leave time for thinking. That is so much a part of our lives right now that I'm sure you've had this Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting. There's no time to think, let alone breathe. So Suzanne says, talk to my team members both in meetings and outside meetings to catch what they're thinking, being interested in their growth and telling them I am. So I think you're coming from the perspective, Suzanne, of a leader. That's fantastic. Having courageous conversations. Absolutely, Sophia. It's a great book called Fierce Conversations. And I appreciate the author's approach. It's a little fierce for my taste, but I appreciate the idea that it serves nobody to not talk about the things that need to be talked about, or to tell the stories and hear the stories that need to be told and heard. Make time to truly get to know people more deeply and personally, right? So the biggest thing is I want you to remember that a Band-Aid program is not going to move the needle. It is not going to change things. Adopting terminology like we support disruptive thinking without the teeth in it, without the leadership modeling these things, you are going to be fighting an uphill battle that you probably won't win. And it's at a great cost to individuals and to organizations and to leaders. So to listen, to actually listen and not respond. Open-ended questions. The most amazing thing ever. Awareness has to go beyond stories or complaining. Yes. So learning skills for how to resolve systemic dysfunctions. Absolutely. So it could be that the issues there are different conflict styles, like the Thomas Kilmann conflict model. You need different styles and you need to understand them and work with them. It could be all the way to the way things were built within the organization or frankly within society. And that's kind of where we're going right now, looking at these larger things and saying, again, tacking a name to it, having a course, doing lip service or tokenism isn't going to get us where we need to be, not where all of us need to be. It might help a few people, but not everybody. So the way I practice it is a reflect, reframe, release, and respond. Stopping myself long enough to evaluate where I fit into the puzzle, and then, or trying at least, I'm not always successful, and then engaging with the other person or people to try to work through that with them. It's a start. This is hard work. It's life work. It's long work. See something, say something. Yes, if you have a psychologically safe relationship with senior leader, work together to call others out that are not modeling the beneficial behavior. Right. Getting clear on what you value, figuring out who the influencers are, the people that have power, leverage your relationships to be an advocate and to create that space. Reflect, reframe. So think about it differently and go, what am I seeing? What am I not seeing? What am I understanding? What am I maybe not understanding? Releasing the sorts of belief that I need to be right, or emotions that I have about it, or even reactions because I don't like the idea because I don't like the person. So release, and then from that point, respond. Does it work every time? No, because sometimes I get caught up in my own story, right? So, but by goodness gracious, I try. So any questions, comments, thoughts, stories, floor is open. Take the microphone, hit me up in the chat, write down my email address if you haven't already, and, contact me later because, hey, that's a thing too. So it's open to the floor. Elizabeth, if you want to take it from here to land this here plane, it's all yours.
Okay. Thank you. And, thank you for all the great information. I know I learned a lot during this session. Lindsay saying thank you as well for all the great insight on, this really interesting topic. I had no idea that we were using the word disruptive wrong this entire time. So I'm sure that, the coiner of that term gets very frustrated when he goes to Forbes.com these days. But yeah, Dee, if you want to go ahead and type your email again in the chat. Additionally, I do have a quick little survey for y'all to fill out. It'll maybe take 30 seconds of your day. We would really appreciate the feedback as well. Just drop that there. Let me know if y'all have trouble accessing it. You never know with permissions and forms like that. But, again, thank you so much. We know that y'all are really busy. You have lots of things going on in your day. So the fact that you're willing to take the hour to invest in yourself, but also invest in yourself with us, we really appreciate as well. I've dropped my information. Follow Breaking the Glass. We do programs about once every other week. I can't keep track these days. It seems like I always have something on my calendar. But again, thank you so much. And if anyone has any last questions that they want to pop in, we are scheduled to be on for another 7 minutes. I know sometimes I don't remember the question until I'm literally about to click the exit button. And then I'm like, oh, I had my epiphany moment.
Yes. I just want to acknowledge Sue's contribution where she says here, part of the process, ask for others to give you feedback on how you can improve as a leader in creating trust and psychological safety. Absolutely. That humility to know what you know and know that you don't know everything, and to be able to ask for that and hear what people say. And remember, in listening to other people, you're listening to their perspective. You're not necessarily listening to something that is a truth about you. It probably has some truth in it, but one of the reasons we avoid feedback is because we're so scared about what it says about our worth as a person, our value in the world. So we avoid it. But we do so at our own peril, especially as leaders. Can you put the slide back on for contact? I can do that. Yes, I have the power. Should have seen the first time I ever did this. It was such a gong show. It was amazing. I was laughing all the way through because I was such a mess. It was great. Any other questions?
Oh no, I was just going to relate to that. I remember doing webinars in 2019. And no one knew how to turn on microphones. No one knew how to turn on cameras. Nothing was set to the default for it to work. So it was very clunky. We have another comment from Lindsay.
Okay, let's go over to my chat box. Yes, feedback in her Brave Not Perfect book. So folks, if you're not looking in the chat, Lindsay's made a recommendation, Reshma Sojani, in her Brave Not Perfect book. There's lots of great books on the shelves, and I'm sure in the next couple of years we're going to see a huge influx of them, because that's where we're at right now. And for women in particular, although I don't exclude men from this comment, finding your voice, figuring out what matters to you, and finding that space and place to get your voice out and share it is work. It's an art, and a lot of women have a lot of, in some cases, frankly, trauma around this, and in some cases, stories they've absorbed that were from their culture or background or families about what a woman should or shouldn't say, when she should or shouldn't say it, how she should or shouldn't say it. So I just want to acknowledge that there's an additional layer when we look through the gender lens around these sorts of ideas. Anything else? Where is this conversation continuing, Elizabeth?
This isn't particularly continuing in a formal setting, but I can drop the Breaking the Glass company page. Again, that's a great place to follow us for additional resources and topics. I share a lot on diversity and inclusion. and career development as well. Continue the conversation with Dee. She has a full calendar of programming coming up as well. And she's introduced me to some people as well. So I feel like she might have a little, like she has a pretty cool network that would be very interested in continuing this topic as well. But
Find me on LinkedIn. I just want to say, find me on LinkedIn. Yes, masculine anxiety. And Craig, I have a friend in Germany. So hit me up on LinkedIn, and I have a friend in Germany that I will hook you up with who has written a book this year about the male perspective on a lot of these ideas. Bernard is fabulous and just a great guy. So if you hit me up, I'll hook you up and you guys can maybe have a chat. But just hit me up on LinkedIn anyways, because these conversations are happening in that space with people I work with, and the network's ever growing because these are critical conversations. They're not nice, they're necessary. That's kind of how I approach it. Anybody, anything else? Welcome, Tammy.
Yeah. Just something I wanted to note when we were talking about sharing ideas. I once took a creativity class. I think Twyla Thorpe is the author. She has a whole book on how to practice your creativity and how to be open to it as well, so that you're observing, you're taking notes. And I really do feel like that's a very empowering way for, if you know that you need to show up with, innovative ideas and like build your creativity on them, you have flushed out what you're not saying you need to ever have a finished product when you're brainstorming, but it is a way that you can take your level or your idea from like level 1 to level 5 simply by making sure that your brain is in a mindset of thinking creatively.
That's a great comment. Taking an improv class is a great thing to do to get you past that sort of self-judgment before you can even step into that space, because we judge ourselves before we go there. So I do have a journal article coming out that's co-authored with a friend in Slovenia about the impact of using art, actual physical art, to engage parts of the brain that allow you to then engage those ideas and create a space where you can contemplate things and not necessarily come up with the, like you said, the fully fleshed out final answer,
right?
But frankly, getting out of your own way. And that's a bit of what I do with something called leader theater. So that's playing in that space going, we don't have to know the answers. Leaders don't have to be perfect. Everything we do is a performance, frankly, of one kind or another. What happens when we start to think of it in those terms? It's a really interesting space to explore, for sure. Lots of fun. I like what I do. I love what I do. So I play with ideas and I talk to people. It's a cool job. Anybody or anything else? You're welcome, Nance. You probably signed off to take care of little ones. It's a real thing, man. Anybody? Well, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to be here. This is time that none of us is going to get back. So I hope that there was some value for you. And I look forward to connecting with you guys on LinkedIn and maybe some other places along the way. You're welcome, Suzanne. You're welcome, Lindsay. Yes, Sophia, I will see you next time. Absolutely. All right. I think I'm going to sign off at this point in time. And I like to thank y'all. I do say the y'all. I come from Calgary. So yeah, we understand a white Stetson hat up here really good. And Teresa, yes, you're welcome as well. All right. Be well. Be awesome. Be you. Bye, guys.
Sounds good. See y'all later. Bye.